maybe I'd pose that same question to Gustav and Peter. Can you give any examples of where the DR policy or the technology hasn't worked as well?
I would say that the biggest thing was just individuals adapting, me being one of them, to the work from home environment where it's something you're doing every day. So thankfully, the majority of our servers are all in the cloud. Our risk and kind of email infrastructure, everything, our network, et cetera, that's all run smoothly. It's just been more human, adaptation. I would say that's, me sitting in beautiful sunny New York, my square footage versus my colleagues in Westchester, the Hamptons, we all had to adapt differently. And so I think the human element's been the biggest thing, making sure people, and you kind of take care, make sure your people are taken care of in terms of what equipment do they need, how is there any way to help with their childcare situation? So I'd say that's the biggest thing, is making sure people can, especially during the months of March and parts of April when things were moving so quickly, so fast, making sure people can really sustain, right? I mean, there's a lot going on. And so I think that was the biggest adjustment, was making sure people are not going to, burn out after working, long 5-6 days in that transition. So a week. So I think that was probably the biggest surprise, and something like we, as the management team, tries to be cognizant of, is checking in with people, and because it was a new world. But knock on wood, the technology element of it and the investment element of it has run pretty smoothly.
As a parent of a toddler, I can tell you my wife and I struggle with the childcare aspect probably more than any other part of the last 2 months. So
yeah,
solidarity, buddy.
Gustav, have you had any hiccups on the technology side, operational side of many of your managers?
We have not, actually. It's similar to what Peter mentioned. It's been very, very seamless. I mean, we've been brainstorming a lot, like what are going to be the implications of this, and what are sort of the adverse things that can happen that are not sort of right in front of you necessarily. And the things that I'm currently most focused on are more, I think Peter mentioned the human element, right? The personal situations that folks have, and when one can get those folks back into the office in a safe manner. And then also, how do you actually sort of retain the culture of the firm when folks are working remotely? How do you actually still drive collaboration? Because one thing I could see and this is not unique to, I think, our industry, I think it's something that could span all industries, reality, because this is impacting folks globally, is the kind of the retention element. When the folks don't necessarily create the same bond with their colleagues, with a firm, they might not have the same level of transparency. So how do you keep up the level of communication internally and build those relationships internally to really kind of tie your employees to you? And I think that's going to be a major focus. And that's something we haven't seen any issues with that, but those issues, if they were to happen, are probably 6-12 months out. And so I think that's just something that's very important to get in front of from a organizational stability perspective. But fortunately for us, knock on wood, it's been a very seamless transition so far. But we're trying to kind of stay in front of folks and make sure they have what they need to, be effective from home, and also manage their personal lives. I have 2 little kids running around behind the door here, so surprisingly enough, none of them has come in yet. But I sympathize.
No, I hear you. And clearly, not only with the kids, but also the burnout of, working and living in the same environment versus going to the office every day. Burnout is a real risk of, and especially lack of physical exercise. If you're working more hours, not able to go to the gym and maybe eat sort of the foods you're used to, it's certainly a problem. Before we move on from some of the issues over the last few weeks, and feel free to deflect if it's not something you want to talk about. Could you guys just go through and mention, what happened when some of your managers had the virus or their family members had the virus? Do you have any key man sort of in place if these are single manager portfolios, or even if it's a systematic strategy, if you have the PM who's ill and can't really spend the time, how have you thought about key man? Maybe you start with Rufus on this one.
I prefer to call it key person risk.
Key person.
And So the majority of the strategies we allocate to are systematic. So that, to a small extent, mitigates the key person risk, right? The machine will keep running for hopefully a little while, even if the key architect is not present. That's one of the key benefits of systematic strategies. We allocate to a small number of discretionary strategies. And so we already have a process in place to review as a team, both our investment team and our due diligence committee will convene and discuss any issues that arise from that. So we haven't had that issue come up. We do have a plan in place for it. The way we allocate is very liquid. So, if we did have to make a change, we could do so very quickly. But we haven't had to go through that process as of yet. Hopefully we will not.
That's great. Peter, you have 90 managers. I assume some of them had at least some fallout.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know what the number of asymptomatic cases is, but I know of two that had it, and they were upfront with us. Thankfully, they're now doing better. I mean, one of them. It is amazing how lingering some of the symptoms can be, but two of them. So one of them was, I would say, is more a key man, and really the only person that is discretionary manager who we would want to be running the portfolio. He voluntarily kind of wound things down. It wasn't a sizable book for us, so it was really a non-event, but it was early on it was early in March, actually, maybe late Feb, when he let us know. And so he just said, I'm going to sit on the sidelines. We said, definitely the right thing to do in our mind. And another one is more of kind of like a co-PM. And so there they were able to kind of continue running the portfolio. But yeah, I mean, that's, I guess, the beauty of diversification is you can tell somebody to, go take it all down and get your rest and get better and find another day.
Gustav, how about you?
Yeah, we went through a process kind of at the start of this whole episode where we went to every portfolio manager and asked them to assign kind of a number 2 if they were out of touch or unavailable for whatever reason. I think we put a time frame around 24 hours. And then we also had a secondary fallback plan there. Couldn't get a hold of the number 2, the firm taking over control of the portfolio. So we had a game plan in place from the get-go. Fortunately, we never had to actually institute it. We had one manager who was actually quite ill in March. He ended up testing negative, but he was definitely out for a little bit. But then, he had his most senior analyst that was sort of the backup number 2 that would, stay on top of the portfolio, manage the trades and whatnot. So it ended up working out very seamlessly for us. But that was sort of our contingency plan, was to just make sure we had a person who knew that they were next in line. And sometimes that was a senior analyst that was directly on the team, knew all the ideas. Sometimes it was the head trader. But that was kind of the fallback.